My background is that, professionally, I've worked as an electrical engineer with a degree in electrical engineering in 1983 from Rice University. I've started dabbling in family history at a big family gathering, probably in the 80s, and inherited some work that my parents had done on their branches of the family. I've also been involved with the Hatcher Family Genealogy Association since sometime, for about 20 years. And 10 years ago, inherited management of the big DNA project there that was started in 2002. I inherited after the previous admin went to a hospital for a minor procedure and didn't survive the trip. So had to pick up the pieces and start from scratch with whatever information we had within the project. That project started with Y test with even back to the old Y12 and Y25. And then, of course, 5 years ago, we started getting the big Y tests and big Y results. And so I've been working extensively with those and thought I'd could share what I've done, what I do when I see new sets of results come in. So that's the gist of the presentation. So, just some background. So this is the overview, a review suggesting what people do, review the block tree, review private variants, review big Y matches, and decide whether it looks like there will be a need for a manual review that FTDNA will provide. And then I'll look at the individual SNPs, compare the SNPs results to the trees available. And it's very helpful to have a good tree, and then use some of David Vance's tools to look at the STR marker changes as well, see if in this particular project, if there's anything useful to be gleaned there. And then, of course, the big thing is to share results with the test participants. A little background, some geography of the Y chromosome. They're somewhere around 60 million base pairs. I heard a report on NPR that new results with the T2T project that evidently the repetitive region is highly variable in length, and that over something like 40 Y chromosomes they sequence, the overall length range from 40 to 60 million base pairs. Only some portion of that is sequenced by the big Y, and I think it's roughly on order of the 15 million base pairs, that avoiding the pseudo autosomal regions at the end, and with less coverage in the centromere, and then none with the big repetitive Q12 region. A little more background, the differences between STRs, the short tandem repeats, and the single nucleotide polymorphisms, the STRs versus SNPs. STR is a named pattern of repeated nucleotides, cat, 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 however many times. They appear at known locations, and during replication, number of copies can go up and down. You can also end up with a partial additional copy. The same change can appear independently in multiple lines of descent. So just because two people have the same value doesn't necessarily mean they have the same ancestor. Additionally, since the marker value can change up or down in any given generation, it can also revert, so that you'll see what looks like the ancestral values again. Different STRs have different typical rates of changes, though again, these are random processes, and it's not like clockwork. Additionally, sometimes the test will just fail to read a given STR. And I'm not sure if there's a clear understanding of why that happens. I have the one that reads as a null in me, but it just didn't seem to, the test just didn't seem to have test coverage there. Additionally, you'll have some people who have multiple STRs not read, where they actually have a significant segment of the Y chromosome missing. There's a multiple deletion project that addresses that. And then finally, on the STRs, the order that they're listed does not match the sequence that they appear on the chromosome. In contrast, a SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism, is a random change at a single location on the Y chromosome. Most often that's a change of one letter to another. Occasionally there are insertions or deletions. And in a good location, that's almost always a once in the evolution of mankind kind of event. You're not going to see a single SNP appear in two different branches of the tree of descendants from a given individual. Occasionally, you'll see that one SNP occurs in this family here and one occurs in a completely different family. It just there are only so many locations and we're getting more and more tests, and so we actually are seeing occasional reappearance of a SNP. They don't revert. And I guess the big thing about SNPs is you don't know where they're going to show up until one happens. So it requires sequencing a large fraction of the chromosome in order to find them. The FTNA to report a SNP requires about 10 good reads. They name the SNP immediately upon discovering one, but they only announce the name of the SNP when they see it in two different kits. And then some tests may just happen not to show reads or very few reads for a given location. And some, at least within some families, a given SNP location may just have poor reads across a whole large number of kits, rather than, gee, one kit just happened to have bad reads here. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's enough to have a pattern. So when results come in, the obvious first step is to look at the block tree to see where FTNA initially placed a tester. And they'll show your branch. This is from the perspective of one individual tester. And then we'll show an average number of private variants for the men in that group. In this case, there was one match, showed an average of 3 private variants. This SNP here is the one used to name this branch. So this is haplogroup I, and specifically haplogroup I, FTD 79, now 570. There are equivalence blocks in several levels. This is a block of SNPs that occurs in some number of generations over some interval of time. And we don't know the order in which these SNPs appear. FTNA picks the name for the top SNP for the SNP that they will use to name the block, and then the remaining SNPs appear in this tree in alphabetical order. And you'll see those equivalent blocks at multiple levels. So in the block tree, all genetically related kits appear in the block tree. So you'll see anyone whose chromosome has the same SNPs, shares the same equivalent blocks. Occasionally you'll find that, gee, this kit shows a DNA match to someone really way far away, and it may just be that this kit was a Y500 kit and shows fewer SNPs in his results, and therefore it will meet the threshold of having fewer than 30 SNPs difference, which is the criterion for having a big Y match. It's good looking at a kit, review the private variants. You'll just see that in the big Y results, list of private variants. You'll see each of them listed by location. You can compare those to a chart that gives you roughly which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are harder to read reliably, which ones are easier to read reliably. And then you can look at the individual SNPs. You'll see the patterns of the forward reverse reads, high quality, low quality, medium quality, and you'll actually see the individual letters. And then of course, this is the list of the nucleotides along the Y chromosome on the top and the location numbers. And some regions are noisy, that they either are too near the centromere or too near the pseudosomal regions, and you'll see a bunch of noise. You may see a number of SNPs in that area. And so in this case, this SNP gee, it seems to show predominantly the derived value of A, but boy, there are an awful lot of solid reads that show the previous value, well, the inherited value of G. So this one's a little less trustworthy. I'll then build up a chart of the SNP reads. So these are the ones shared by members of the project. These are the private variants in each of these individual kits. So you can see that here's the large equivalent block of SNPs that are shared by all members of the project. Here's a SNP that is shared by some smaller number, and then only these two gentlemen share that SNP. You can use Y-browse to find the locations or the name. So if you say, gee, I've got a SNP that's at 6,534,063, you can use Y-browse to find that that's the SNP called A19209, or conversely, you can enter A19209 here, and then it will bring up the location. So it works both directions. And you can look up the SNPs by location after they're released, after they're announced by FTDNA, but before they're shared by two kits. So before FTDNA announces them and posts them to the tree. And this is just zooming out to show here is that A19209, and here are a number of other SNPs nearby. And I guess actually this doesn't show, but often, actually here's an example where there are two SNPs at one location. And so typically this would be one SNP is, say, a change from a T to an A, and the other is a change from a T to a G. You may actually see two different SNPs with two different changes at one location. The BAMS-away Chrome extension can be very useful. Unfortunately, it was removed from the Chrome Web Store. So if you've got it, great. If not, you have to use the other techniques. This allowed you to add the name of a SNP you want to look at in the list of private variants. So go to the list of private variants, click on add a SNP location, enter the name, and say OK, and then it now shows up in the list of private variants, and you can click on it and look at the reads. And that's what allows filling out a table like this, and that, gee, I've got these private variants, I've got the locations, I've got the names, I can look up these private variants. Normally, FTDNA only would allow this man to look at his results, but by using BAMS-away, I can directly look at the results for other kits in the project. And without the BAMS-away, there are two techniques. This one is to try to find a SNP that's nearby. If I want to look for FTC 79041, well, that's a new private variant, but maybe I can try to find one that's, another one that FTDNA has identified, but that they identified a long time ago. And so this example, FT 73163, and then look that up in the list of named variants. I want to see all versions, put in that nearby SNP's name, and it shows this person has the ancestral value, but now I can look a few locations back to see the SNP that I really was wanting to check. And in this case, he also has the ancestral value. Another step is to review the list of big Y matches, and those will show the SNP differences. So in this case, I see that all of these kits show these two SNPs in the list of differences, and those are likely the private variants for the kit from whose perspective I'm looking. Occasionally, or when the results just come out, you may find that only some of the matching kits will share a SNP, and that is an indication that perhaps that person shares that SNP with the new tester, the tester for whose results came out. and that would indicate that you may well have a manual review pending, that the FTDNA staff will review this branch of the haplotree and produce an update the block tree, splitting a block of equivalence or identifying a new branch by having two new shared SNPs. Unfortunately, they don't provide any notice that they're going to do one or any notice that one has completed. The only thing you'll see is, oh, suddenly we have a new haplogroup for this kid or for these kids. By looking at the list of big Y matches and non-matching variants, you may be able to identify when that manual view will happen, and you may be able to identify a branch that they haven't identified yet. Rarely, but occasionally, you may find that they've missed it, and that you can call one of their big Y specialists and say, hey, I think we've got a change here. We've got some more kids that share a given SNP, and they will make adjustments. It was about a year ago, they announced a new Discover tool, which has many features. One of the most interesting is this time tree, which will show you a branch and show you all the kits that descend from that branch. And so this is essentially the equivalent of the block tree, but gives the better time estimates. They have algorithms based not only on the SNPs, but I believe also based on the STRs to provide estimated dates for the birth of the ancestors, the most recent common ancestor for each branch. Again, it shows all the kits based just on the DNA. There are many other tabs which show details of the date estimates, essentially showing you a graph where the most likely date is so-and-so, but here's the confidence interval and so forth. And they've added a new tool, a globe tracker, that provides you an estimated migration map for the men in that ancestral line. This last January, they added a Discover tool for groups, which shows similar information, but it only shows it for members of a group project. And you can select which members of the project you want to appear in that chart. And in this example, we've got it turned on for all the men who we believe descend from this one common ancestor born about 1613. Again, though, this only shows members of the project, but for any members of the project, it will show the earliest known ancestor information that they have entered. The SNP tracker tool is another very interesting one. It shows the projection of migration paths, and then it also shows you in a different tab a list of the SNPs leading up to that kit with the dates. These are now dates that I believe come directly from FTDNA, with the estimated ranges, but color-coded by era, Neolithic, Mesolithic, so forth, up through modern era, and the number of kits for how many men belong to that haplogroup. If you're looking up a SNP in the SNP tracker, if you get the SNP name from 23andMe, which does test some locations on the Y chromosome, occasionally those names will not be here, and so you may need to use Y-browse to find an equivalent name, because some SNPs end up with multiple names. And additionally, an interesting feature, interesting, not necessarily helpful, is they show the locations of ancient remains sharing a given SNP. What you do with all that is, you'd really like to try to figure out how that relates to ancestry. So here we've mapped those SNP names onto a tree of descendants in the Hatcher project from the earliest known ancestor, who born about 1613. The equivalence block above all of these gentlemen shows 54 SNPs, which appeared in some very long interval of time. I don't remember, 4,000, 5,000 years since the earliest ancestor, his line split from those leading to anyone else. We've been able to map individual SNPs to individual men for example, this SNP FTB 54238, we had just known that William Sr. carried it, but weren't sure if it was William, first appeared in William Sr. or Edward, until we got these results for this Hatcher man, who descends from a different son of Edward Sr. He did not carry the SNP, and therefore we know that it first appeared in William Sr. And I point out there's a substantial range of variation in the appearance of SNPs. Here in 3 generations, we have 4 new SNPs shared by all men who descend from Barnett Hatcher. On the other hand, in one of the kits over here, we have a man with only 1 private variant appearing since the time of William the Immigrant, born 1613. So while the numbers like 83 years per SNP as a handy rule of thumb, the range is very, very, very broad. There's a second example with a different Hatcher family. We have 2 groups, one that moved to New England and another that moved to Newfoundland, and then even one man who remained in England. And so here we have 4 generations with no shared SNPs, but then here we have the 4 more generations with 5 SNPs that appeared. Another example is just using a spreadsheet instead of a hand-drawn diagram to say, okay, here's the family tree information from all the members of the project. Okay, these men down here appeared to share our ancestry. And then we're able to locate some shared SNPs and say, oh, okay, well, this fits with the tree. And oh, we've got 2 more men here. And oh, they don't share this SNP, but they do share these 2 generations. So really, we know that John IV carried this SNP. 2 more men over here carry this SNP, but did not carry any of these. And we had thought that those men belonged to an entirely different Culver family, but now know they belong here, and we have some missing generations that we need to figure out. David Vance's tools are really wonderful, very powerful, very useful for helping view this information from a different perspective and helping to analyze the data. First, you download all the STR markers for each kit you want to consider. Just go to the STR results, the Big Y STR results, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click the download button. Do that for each kit to put all those files in a given folder. Use the CSV analysis tool to select all of those files. In this case, I've got 23 files selected, and then click on execute. This will produce a result file that summarizes all the STR values, including up to the 838 that are sequenced by the Big Y 700 test. You can take that result file, shuffle the data, modify it as you wish. For the Hatcher project, we have some information about the genealogy, so we may group the lines in the file, and then use that for the SAP tool, the big tool here from David Vance. The SAP tool, you choose that input file, execute. One of the intermediate results is just a table of the STR results, all in a consistent manner. And so and you may have a couple of iterations to get to where you're executing correctly. Clean up the input file as you wish. Comment out lines that, oh, I really didn't mean to include that. Modify it as need be. And then run it again. And then I will select the entire table of results here and then paste them into a Google Docs spreadsheet. In the Google Docs spreadsheet, it's easy to hide all the columns for columns where every marker for every kit, you see the same values. And then it's much easier to see the broad span of all the STR markers across all the kits. So these are all the markers of interest out of the 838 for these 20 some odd kits. And it all fits on one screen. and from that can try to see if you can identify any shared changes. Then, in fact, we also see some shared changes in the markers beyond marker 111. So both in our Burton kits within that project and also in some of the Hatcher members of the project. Again, though, these are STR markers. They're not necessarily reliable. So these are suggestive of branches, but they're not as definitive as the SNPs. SAP also produces a tree based on all the STR marker values and the SNP results. And I've purposely zoomed out so that you can't actually see the names of anything associated with the kit. But this gives you a feel for what the tree can look like. And in each branch, it includes estimated dates for when the branch appeared. Don't treat this as gospel. It is based on what you feed it, and you can tell it, oh, these men all have the Hatcher name, those men all have the Burton name, and if you're wrong about your groupings, garbage in, garbage out certainly applies. If you say, no, these people all belong together, well, it's going to trust what you tell it. So it may not be 100%. It's based on, it only can produce results based on what you feed it. But if nothing else, it provides a different view of the information you have and can be useful for saying, oh, wait, I didn't realize, oh, yes, look at this. And you go and find things in the Google Docs spreadsheet that, oh, I hadn't really considered that as significant. Right, I'll pay more attention to that, and maybe this guy really does belong over here instead of over there. And then, of course, you want to share the results with the project participants, include links to the tools, screenshots, and you can also encourage the owners of the kits, the sample donors, to join the relevant haplogroup projects, the R1b, all clades, so forth, which have hundreds or thousands of members. Post some updates to the activity feeds within the project, send out bulk messages, the bulk email to project members, then do try to maintain project member privacy. Certainly, people can reverse engineer and say, oh, well, these men had that SNP, and these men show up in the table of results at FTNA with that SNP, and therefore I can figure out which kit number belongs to which name, but there's not much you can do about that. And you may also want to post updates to social media groups if you've got a Facebook group or a wiki tree or something for your individual project. And that's it. And I've got a bunch of links that provide to any of the tools that I've used.